Hey, be sure to visit my website, www.saracarter.com, for my latest reporting and stories. While you're there, be sure to subscribe to my email list so that you don't get shadow banned. And I want to talk to you about that, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit in the show, what happened with Twitter, Matt Taibbi, and the fact that he released with Elon Musk the email communications that literally show that Twitter, prior to Elon Musk, was involved in suppressing information regarding Hunter Biden and the laptop from hell. And I love that Miranda Devine and, President Trump and everybody used that statement, the laptop from hell, because that's literally what it was. And we talked about this on my last episode, didn't we? We talked about the fact that, there were all of these intelligence officials that also assisted, former U.S. officials, 51 of them, that signed on a letter that said that the laptop from hell was Russian disinformation. And they lied to you. They lied to you. They lied to the American people directly in your face. And some of them went on to take very prominent positions in big companies, one of them being at Twitter. That was James Baker, the general counsel for the FBI. Elon Musk fired him. We're going to be talking about that coming up. But we're also joined today, and this is a great guest, somebody who is going to open up your mind. I mean, it's going to be explosive, I'm telling you, because she is the senior director of policy at the Conservative Policy Institute, Rachel Bovard, and she is going to lay it out on the line, like the failure of the Republican Party to do the right thing. Those in the Republican Party that are actually trying to do what's best for the American people. And right now is the time that they can do it. They can literally, and we're going to be talking about Kevin McCarthy, and we're not going to hold back. She does not hold back. We're going to be talking about Mitch McConnell. She does not hold back. You do not want to miss this episode. We'll be diving into the ways the House leadership has destroyed the regular order of Congress in favor of procedure specifically designed, listen to this, to give the leader the most control possible. It's disgusting and it's anti-democratic, and we will break down what needs to be done to fix it. I'll also cover the latest statistics from the southern border. It's just tragic, and how fake asylum claims continue to grow. This is an episode you need to hear because our national sovereignty is at risk. Hey, everyone, please follow and subscribe. Get all the links at SaraACarter.com. That's SARA Carter, CARTER.com. Please follow and subscribe. Get all those links there. And while you are there, sign up for our email list so that you don't get shadow banned. Before I go to Rachel Bovard, I want to tell you about a company that I absolutely believe in. It's one that sponsors our show. It means so much to me that they do, because I really believe that we need organizations that are fighting for us in Washington, D.C., and that's AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens. Before I get started, I just want to take a moment to remember all the men and women of World War II, considered one of the greatest generations. Yesterday was December 7th. My father was 16 and a half. He lied about his age. He was in Alabama, poor. He was working on his family's farm, and he wanted to go and fight for his country. These were people like my husband, who also was part of the military, that truly believe in our nation, truly believe in what our nation stands for. And I know all of you out there, if there's anyone in your life who was a part, and I know so many people have already passed away, but who was a part of that amazing, amazing time, please just tell them thank you. Let them know that you love them and that you appreciate everything that you did for them. And I know I'm going to do the same. So thank you, all of you, for your service, and God bless you all. Now I'm going to go to the Twitter files. Yes, folks, the Twitter files. It is the latest reporting from the Twitter files from journalist Matt Taibbi. I had an opportunity to meet him once. I think he is a phenomenal journalist and just an all-around nice guy. And I think it's horrible how the left has treated him. I think he is doing the right thing, exposing this Marxist leftist agenda that is utilizing, and I would say even fascist, utilizing corporate America to drive their narrative and their policy, and literally stomping on the First Amendment and on our right to know the truth. So now, I agree, Elon Musk, sunlight is the greatest disinfectant. And that is what is happening here. That is what is happening here. Let me read a little bit of the latest Twitter thread from journalist Matt Taibbi, and then we'll get to Rachel Bovard, because you do not want to miss her. I mean, this is just incredible stuff, and it'll give you the power to do what's right. We are going to take our country back. I believe that. I see the glass as half full. I am not giving up on my nation. And this is part of the reason why I'm not giving up. Look at what just happened with Twitter. So this is what Matt Taibbi wrote. On Friday, the first installment of the Twitter files was published here. We expected to publish more over the weekend. Many wondered why there was a delay. We can now tell you part of the reason why. On Tuesday, Twitter Deputy General Counsel and former FBI General Counsel James Baker, I originally broke the story on James Baker in 2017 that he was under criminal investigation for leaking information to journalists, by the way, about operation that was being conducted by the FBI. You would think he would have been busted for all the other stuff he did to President Trump, but that wasn't the case. Instead, he got a slap on the wrist and went and took a big 6-figure salary at Twitter. So this is what Matt Taibbi says, and it's just incredible. We can now tell you part of the reason why on Tuesday, Twitter General Counsel Jim Baker was fired. Among the reasons, vetting the first batch of Twitter files without the knowledge of the new management. That would be Elon Musk. The process for producing the Twitter files involved delivery to 2 journalists, Barry Weiss and me, via a lawyer close to the management. However, after the initial batch, things became complicated. Over the weekend, while we both dealt with obstacles to new searches, it was at Barry Weiss who discovered that the person in charge of releasing the files was someone named Jim. When she called to ask Jim's last name, the answer came back, Jim Baker. My jaw hit the floor, said Weiss. The first batch of files reporters received was marked Spectra Baker emails. Baker is a controversial figure. He has been something of a Zelig of FBI controversies dating back to 2016, from the Steele dossier to the Alpha server mess. And I think you all remember that. John Solomon and I broke the story on the Alpha server mess. He resigned. That was when they basically set up, just for your memory, the Trump server at Trump Tower and made it look like there were pings going back and forth. These were people connected to the Clintons and to Hillary Clinton's campaign and the DNC. And it made it look like there were pings going back and forth between a Russian bank, Alpha Bank, and the Trump server. All of it was bogus. The FBI had gone down there after those rumors started spreading throughout the media. Leaked again. I want you to think about that. Who leaked that? That controversy was dropped, but the rumor had already been spread. This is the disinformation campaign. Here's a guy who literally was connected to a disinformation campaign with the FBI, working in cahoots with people in our intelligence community, right? Making up stories about President Trump and then trying to hide stories that were true about President Biden. You cannot make this stuff up, folks. This is why our nation is in such danger right now and in such big trouble. So that goes all the way back to him. He resigned in 2018 after an investigation into leaks to the press. I talked about that. There was a story in particular, I believe it was on Yahoo News. He leaked information on that. It did not have to do with Trump. It had to do with a classified operation. The news that Baker was reviewing the Twitter files surprised everyone involved, to say the least. New Twitter chief Elon Musk acted quickly to exit Baker Tuesday. Reporters resumed searches through Twitter files material, a lot of it today. The next installment, thank you, Matt Taibbi, of the Twitter files will appear. Stay tuned. I plan on doing that. I plan on staying tuned to what he will be producing and what Bari Weiss will be producing. I think it's very, very important. And I feel like he is doing the right thing for our nation and for our country. We need to be able to trust, once again, at least some of our social media. I don't know when we're ever going to regain that trust again with our mainstream media. CNN's doing a good job of getting rid of people that have failed in their duties to protect the First Amendment and the American people and our republic and democracy. So I think we're seeing some changes, but still, I mean, I'm cautious, right? We're all cautious. The reason so many on the left are downplaying this, and then we're going to get to, I don't want you guys to move because Rachel Bovard is coming up and you are not going to want to miss that interview. But the reason why so many on the left are downplaying this is because they are directly involved in this, because they were willing to sacrifice their ethical standards, their principles, their morals. Well, they should have them, especially their ethics when it comes to journalism. They were willing to sacrifice that and literally eat out of the hands of our government like dogs. They literally just lapped up all the lies that were being told to them by our intelligence apparatus, like John Brennan, James Clapper, James Comey at the FBI, James Baker. They were willing to do all of that. And they should be humiliated by it. They should literally be humiliated and they should be fired. And that's what they did. They were lapdogs because they didn't like Trump. And guess what? They didn't like you. And they don't like you. And that's what we are going to talk about. Rachel Bovard and I are going to speak to that. So you don't want to miss that, because even people within the Republican Party feel that same way. Before I get to Rachel, I want to tell you about a company, though, that does care about you, that does care about America, that does believe in the American people. And that is MyPillow and Mike Lindell, the CEO for MyPillow. You can get a 6-piece towel set, which was regularly $89.98. You can get that now for $39.98. You can't beat that deal, and especially with Christmas right around the corner. I'm telling you, if you have kids in college, if you have friends that have just moved into a new apartment or a new house, get them this towel set. You are not going to regret it. That is all I have in my house. These towels are so well made. They feel great. They look great. They are just big enough. They wash great. I love them. I love them all. For a limited time, get the MyPillow 6-piece towel set regularly $89.98. You can get it now for $39.98. You can't beat that at mypillow.com/Carter with promo code Carter. There you'll find deep discounts on all MyPillow products and get your 6-piece MyPillow set for only $39.98. Shop mypillow.com/Carter, promo code Carter. That's mypillow.com/Carter. I'm so excited to have Rachel Bovard here. She is the Senior Director of Policy at the Conservative Policy Institute. She's a former legislative director for Senator Rand Paul. I got to tell you, I love Senator Rand Paul. Bovard is also the co-author of Conservative: Knowing What to Keep, along with Jim DeMint. She also serves on the board of Council for National Policy Action, the advisory board of the American Moment, and both the advisory board and the board of the American Conservative. She is also a senior tech columnist at The Federalist. How do you have time for all of this? I always feel like my day is just completely jam-packed. I have nothing to complain about now.
Yeah, this is even a more pointed question now that I have a 6-month-old. So yeah,
congratulations. Congratulations.
He's not sleeping, so I'm not sleeping. So that's how I get it all done, right?
I swear, women, we're multitaskers. We really are. I hate when people say there's no such thing as multitasking, because I do believe there is a such thing. It doesn't mean everything's going to come out perfectly, but it does mean we're doing like 5 million things. And somehow we can stay up and get it all done before morning. And especially, I know, because we have 6 kids all together. And I'm telling you, Rachel, that's your first. It will never end. Now until the end of time. So you will be multitasking. It's the greatest thing in life, though. The greatest thing in life is to have children. And that's what we're fighting for, right? We're fighting for our children and our country and the future of our nation. And Rachel, I hear so much especially from people who are listeners, people when I just meet them on the street or when I'm traveling, and people walk up to me or they recognize me and they're so frustrated, they're so upset because they feel that Washington is nothing more than a cesspool, that the people that they're voting into office really aren't paying attention to them and could really care less about the future of America and care more about themselves than they do about the country. And that's a sad testament when people don't trust neither the media nor lawmakers to do what's right. Where do you think that's coming from?
Well, I think it really speaks to how disconnected I think our political leaders, and I think in both parties, but we're talking specifically on the right, have become from the people they represent. I actually wrote a column recently for the New York Times, of all places. I can't believe they actually published it. But I talked about this phenomenon where, the Republican base knows that their elected leaders, in many cases, are embarrassed of them. Right? They don't like them. They're embarrassed that they represent people that would vote for Donald Trump, right? That go to NASCAR rallies, that go to gun shows, that vacation in Branson, Missouri, right? They don't want to represent those people. They want to represent like the cocktail set, right? With the appropriate opinions and Ivy League degrees. And, you have been seeing, I think, this disconnect grow over the last decade, 15 years, 20 years or so. I think the first salvo of it was the Tea Party. Right. That was the first, I think, recognition of the fact that, there was a big divide between what people at the base thought and how they were being represented. I don't think that message resonated with Washington. Right. And that's why I think they sent a nuclear missile, which was Donald Trump, to say, again, you didn't hear us. We hate the system. And so we're going to send someone we think can destroy the system. And, one of the beneficial things I think that you saw from Trump's presidency was that it was very clarifying. We saw that there was actually a deep state, and we saw that the people who live in it have teeth and claws, and they are unwilling to relinquish their power, and they will do anything they can to subvert, the elected officials, and particularly the elected president of the United States. And, I think that lesson still really hasn't been learned from Washington. And, you look at even just this election, right? These 2022 midterms where the Republican Party underperformed so dramatically. And yet there's been no change. We just, the House hasn't technically reelected its leadership yet, but the Senate just reelected its leaders. Potentially no change in our political organizations. And to top it off, they walk into the lame duck. And what is the first thing they do in the Republican Senate? They pass the so-called Respect for Marriage Act, which puts a huge bullseye on the back of any religious conservative or anyone with traditional views about marriage, opens them to lawsuits where the punishment will be the process. And now they're talking about doing an amnesty deal. These people have learned nothing. Absolutely nothing. They have no idea why they lost. None at all.
No, they don't. And you're so brilliant because you would think it would be common sense for them, right? I say this over and over again. I used to say to people, the elitists in Washington, those elitist Republicans that really did not like and were open about it, the NASCAR, attendees like me. I love NASCAR. I was in Bristol, Tennessee, and I used to go down there and I thought it was so much fun to hang out with just genuine Americans anywhere, whether I'm in Baltimore, Maryland, hanging out with people, on the pier or in Bristol, Tennessee, or in Ohio, in Dayton, Ohio. I love what our nation is. I love this hodgepodge of wonderful people and the grit of the American worker and the fact that we have so many amazing people serving in our military. And it's a small percentage, but they're an all volunteer force. And I'm so proud of that as an American. And then I talk to these people in Washington, D.C. in this swamp, and I hear them and I say, just keep talking like that and Trump will win, because you are so judgmental. You are so sure that you have the answers for the American people. That makes you no different than the leftist leaning Democrats, other than the fact that the left is willing to work cohesively to target the Republicans, and the Republicans are all infighting and have no idea what's going on. But they definitely jump into the same pool, right? So why is that? Why are Republicans so eager, you know, even in the Senate, to agree with the Democrats on issues that are fundamental to the conservative movement, to, I think to individual rights and individual freedoms, and they're willing to give it up?
Yeah, I think that they're definitely, so many of our politicians are just compelled by wanting to be liked by the right people. Right? They want to be liked by the New York Times editorial board. They want to be liked by, the cocktail set and the sort of very elite opinion makers in Washington.
Right.
The parties
at the White House.
Yeah.
We saw Kevin McCarthy and his wife in the big picture, the drama. Everybody's walking in. It didn't matter that Hunter Biden was there. Yeah, it didn't matter.
And it's something that I think one of the most misunderstood features of Washington, D.C., in my opinion, and, I spent 10 years working on Capitol Hill, and I've seen this play out in so many scenarios, is the social pressure of Washington.
Right.
People always think of Washington as, the West Wing or House of Cards or whatever. It is Mean Girls. It is the movie Mean Girls. And what I mean by that is...
That's so good. That's so true.
If you go against elite opinion, right? If you actually... go against the consensus of whatever the Washington sort of, Acela corridor feels should be the case, you are shunned. You are shunned. You are not invited to cocktail parties. You literally, think about this. The Senate Republicans meet for lunch 3 times a week behind closed doors. It's how they work out their business. There are members that will not sit with you. That's literally how much of like a high school cafeteria it is. And, you have fundraisers who will drop you and say, we don't want to raise money for someone who, is a bigot and opposes the Respect for Marriage Act, even though that bill, the opposition to it, had nothing to do with gay marriage. Honestly, it had to do with how religious liberty was not protected. Right?
Religious liberty, individual liberty, the liberty of, and the rights for each individual to make those choices and have those choices for themselves. But now it's being forced. It was kind of like what happened during COVID, right? What was better for the group than for the individual? And nobody thought outside of those parameters, saying like, well, wait a minute, are we adopting similar tactics? And look, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I believe that COVID was real. I'm stating that only because, I know some people don't, but I believe in individual rights and I believe in the individual. And there was none of that happening. And now there's none of that happening in our bills. So. Right.
And that bill is about to make Jack Phillips's out of all of us, right? Jack Phillips, who has been sued for the last, 5 or 6 years repeatedly to bake the cake, bigot, right? That is now national policy to be able to do that to people because of this bill. And so you saw some conservatives stand up and fight it. You saw Senator Mike Lee, have an amendment and really push for that. But you didn't have a majority of Republicans willing to take that step. And I think, honestly, it's just because they're afraid. They're afraid of upsetting the tastemakers. They're afraid of upsetting, the opinion boards of major newspapers. And so I think as a political movement, the right needs to get to a point where they just do not care what the people who hate them think about them. And there's some members that do this, right? My former boss, Rand Paul, he doesn't give a flip. I'll tell you what.
That's why I love him. I love him because even, he will stand up. He will lay the cards out on the table. He did it with Dr. Anthony Fauci. I thought he was brilliant. The way he handled him, the way he questioned him, it was right on target, right? And I've seen people like Louis Gohmert and others just come out and do their own thing, on Capitol Hill and stand up. But you're right, they are targeted. And the targeting is vicious and it's mean. And it is Mean Girls. I didn't think of it that way, but you're absolutely right, because they have the help of like the New York Times and the Washington Post, and for that matter, the Washington Times, if it's on the right, or and I've worked for a lot of these organizations, the Washington Examiner, others. If someone wants to come after you, you could end up losing everything. But the thing is that we have to have people with courage that are willing to stand up. How does that happen? Before we get into the procedure, I'm going to play a clip of you, which I think is probably one of the most brilliant clips. I can't wait for everyone to hear this, your testimony, but I'm going to have you explain that. And I love the fact that we have strong, powerful women behind the scenes, and people should know your name because you're out there fighting for us. But how do we overcome this when we have now become so global, so interconnected on a communications level? And it appears, based on what we're seeing in these last elections, that there's going to be a good portion of the American people, at least half of them, that are not going to be represented well.
Well, I think who we elect does matter, right? We tend to, I think for the last, how many years on the right, we pull the lever for people with a good resume, people who, say the right things about, the touchstones of traditional Republican policy agenda. But I think we need to be sort of vetting these people as voters a little more thoroughly, because it's not enough anymore to say, well, I'm going to go to Washington and I'm going to get the government out of the way. That's a great starting place 10 years ago. But we are now at the point where Democrats in Congress and in the White House and everywhere else want to control your child's education. They want to control what they're, taught about gender ideology in schools. They want to use every avenue of government to promote abortion. You have all manner of sins that you have to have people diving in to fight specifically. Right. It's not just like, oh, I'm going to vote against more spending. Well, yeah, you should do that. But that's baseline. Right. That should be a baseline expectation.
Yeah, it's not like a moral principle.
Right. So we have to have people that are willing to be fearless and are willing to sort of take the hits from the mainstream media. And as a movement, I think when we see those people, we have to stand up beside them and let them know, hey, the fact that Mitch McConnell hates you every now and then, right, is
it's a badge of honor.
Right. Yeah. It's not a bug. We're proud of you.
Yeah, it's a badge of honor. I don't expect to be invited to Mitch McConnell's cocktail parties. I never have. So I just figure like it'll never happen. So why even try, right? Why even put myself on the line there? But you're absolutely right. We do need to stand up for those people that are willing to speak out. And I've said this over and over again when people come up to me, and especially early on, remember that whole thing about the silent majority. Mm-hmm. And it just makes me so frustrated because I'm like, don't be silent anymore. Just speak up. There's so many of us out there. We can give each other strength. I really believe that we need to start speaking up. I believe the silent majority, I don't want to hear that anymore. If you're a majority, speak up. And at least put your cards on the table. Let's talk about that, because that's something that you're actually fighting for, Rachel. And I mean, I know I was so excited when I saw this clip. I'm like, I just think she is amazing. I want to play this clip. I want you all to listen. This is during your testimony, and I'll have you explain. You're sitting next to Mark Meadows. I know him well, and you are laying the cards out on the table for everyone. And I think it's brilliant. Listen to this.
Before we even begin to discuss the specifics of how House rules should change, it's important to ask, why does procedure even matter? In politics, aren't majorities the only thing that matters? The answer, of course, is that procedure, that is, the rules that govern the House, are what make majorities matter. And, at its core, procedure is what makes representation matter. The rules are how individual members of Congress are given the right to exercise their will on the body. It is the structure by which all voices are heard. But the House of Representatives in 2022 is as autocratic as it has ever been. Over the course of the last 15 years, the People's House has increasingly just reflected the whims of 3 or 4 people and no more. When I came to the House as a junior staffer in 2006, open rules on appropriations bills were the norm. Members would vote until the early hours of the morning on any and all issues individual members cared about. Fast forward to now, I've spent 5 years teaching staff who have never even seen an open rule. As I tell many of them, it's a unicorn, mythical, elusive, and exists only in books. Staff today have seen one process, usually giant bills written behind closed doors, dumped on the membership with little time to read the bill, much less amend it. They are bullied into voting for the bill and punished if they don't. The House, in other words, is broken for the members, but it works as intended for leadership, K Street, and special interests.
I love that. I love how I love seeing Mark Meadows' face right next to you while you're reading that. And he's looking at you like he knows this is all true, right? He knows everything you're saying is true.
He lived it.
He lived it. And there is that, I guess there's a million questions in what you said, but lies that conflict, right? You have all of these perks when you're in leadership. You have all of these things that you never had in your life, the same way when you're a politician and a lawmaker and when you're somebody who's very notable, which is why I think Rand Paul is so interesting. He's such, what is the word? He's such a dichotomy, right, to all of that, because he speaks out, he lays cards out on the table, he's different than everybody else, and he just doesn't care, and yet he can retain his position. He's become like that pivot point, right? Like, oh, what's Rand gonna do? What's Rand Paul gonna say, right? Yeah, he's lucky that way, that he somehow fit his peg right in there and is able to challenge that. So let's talk about that. Bills are going through that nobody's even reading. There's so much pork. Taxpayer dollars are being wasted. More so than the money that we're losing is our principles, the foundation that our nation was founded on. It's being ripped apart from the Patriot Act way back after 2001, which of course my husband's military, I believe in the U.S. intelligence community, but that literally was the very beginning of the erosion of our civil rights, our rights to our Fourth Amendment rights, our freedom to be able to not have the government being intrusive into our world. And now that's just pretty much over, I feel. What is it? How did this happen? How did it happen that our lawmakers were just like, okay, you gave me this giant bill of hundreds of pages the night before and I'm going to vote for it?
Well, this, I think it's very important to understand how this actually unfolds, because we're actually witnessing it right now. And, it's December. We're watching a huge omnibus bill potentially take shape on the Hill. And what they'll do is this is an intentional process. They cloak it in the language of, oh, we haven't had time to draft this bill. We don't have an agreement on these top line numbers. Oh my gosh, we're running out of time. We're going to have to do this short-term CR. Oops, it's going to go up to December 23rd. Oh no. And then they'll drop the bill on people right before Christmas Eve. It's all planned. All of it.
Right.
Everything is written, right? There's no scramble. No, the bill has been sitting in a drawer for the last 3 months. It's written. And they use this panic, this artificial crisis mentality to bully members. And they use the timeline, right? They'll use artificial panic. They'll push it up against a holiday deadline. And then they'll spring the bill on people and say, oh no, we just finished it. Oh, I'm sorry, you wanted to go home? Well, you have to vote for this bill first. So the incentives, right, are all skewed. The incentives are to not read the bill, vote on it, and get out of town as quickly as possible.
And that's what they do.
And because that's what a very select few in Washington want, right? K Street doesn't want you, reading the bill for all its little goodies that it's inserted in there with its lobbyists,
Right.
The same with any number of leadership. They're trying to satisfy all these different members. Usually these omnibus bills aren't even just about spending. There are actual individual pieces of legislation included in, their ride-along provisions, because this is a must-pass bill. So every unrelated bill that you can think of gets attached to these things. And so, what I was talking about in that statement is how fundamentally broken the process is, because when we think about procedure and the rules of the House and Senate and how they work, the process affects policy. If you don't have good process, you don't get good policy outcomes. So it's so important. And the House Freedom Caucus is fighting about this right now. It's so important to have good process so all voices are heard and amendments can be offered and things can be done in daylight.
Right. And this is what stuns me. And I when you brought up the pork and, the fact that they don't want us to see these, little juicy details inside the legislation or inside the bill, it's because it's crazy. Because if we did see it, we would be like, no, you got to stop that. I remember the White Coat Project. It's a group that's like conservative, but they're animal rights group. And they exposed all of these beagles, right? All this funding that was going year after year after year to the NIH, right? And it would be the same damn test over and over again. They'd put all these cute little beagles on treadmills. I know, it's so sad, guys. Wait till you hear this. Everyone out there is just like sticking their fingers in their kids' ears right now. And these little beagles would run on the treadmills until they died of a heart attack. And I'm like, well, okay, I think like 10 years ago or whatever, when you started this project, you kind of figured out you can run a beagle until it has a heart attack. And whatever study you needed was already fixed. But that kind of money, our money, is being spent like this in these crazy, wasteful ways, and sometimes to our own detriment, as evidenced by the ongoing investigation into the NIH right now. I'm just using them as one example, and Wuhan laboratories, and the fact that we may have been funding, and we did, gain of function studies in China.
Well, and this goes back to the social pressure argument I was making too, because think about this, right? We send people to Washington and we say, vote against these bills, slow them down, do everything you can to stand up against them. But it's structured so that anyone who does that, the cost is extensive. Because if
talk
you're
about
the
that
guy,
cost. Yeah,
talk
talk about that
guy.
cost.
Think about this in the Senate in particular, where so much runs on consent. You need 100 senators to agree to expedite passage of this bill. If you are the guy, the one person who says, no, I'm not going to speed up passage, you have to run all the time on this bill. The rules mandate that we run 30 hours of debate post-cloture, like, well, I'm going to demand that we do this. 99 other senators are then like, you are keeping me from Christmas. Right? Like, you are keeping me from watching my children open their presents. And it's awful, right? It's awful because then all the ire is targeted against you. It is unforgivable, right, to make them miss a holiday. But again, that's by design. They do that. They load it up against a holiday to make it as painful as possible for anyone to object. And so most people just don't, right?
How can they change that? How can we change that? What do we need to do to change that? Why don't we just say, no, you can't do it by December 16th. It has to be done by November 29th. I don't know, December 1st.
So it's the way to get around this, right, is to actually have a normal, sane appropriations process, which we actually haven't had in Washington since 1996. But there are other ways of getting around this, right? You bring 2 or 3 bills to the floor instead of 12, right, in one bill. And that request and demand has to come from the rank and file members. That has to be a condition of electing you leader. And that is what the House Freedom Caucus is trying to do with Kevin McCarthy right now. But in the Senate, it's also true. Republican senators shouldn't put up with this anymore. Right? They should say, McConnell, if we're going to elect you, we demand a regular appropriations process.
But they're always getting strong-armed by McConnell. It's like, I hear this in the background all the time. Yes, I do hear rumors. I don't know it exactly. I'm not a fly on the wall inside Mitch McConnell's office, but he controls the purse strings.
He does.
And he likes to play, God up there, I'm sure, to some extent. It's like, hey, you're not going to make me do anything I don't want to do, or you're not going to get my help with your next election. Or we're going to look for somebody else, right? I mean, is that how it goes?
It is in the Senate. That is very true. The Senate Leadership Fund, which is Mitch McConnell's leadership PAC, has more money than anybody else. There's all this debate about the NRSC and how they spent their money. The Senate Leadership Fund has more money than God in political races. And it's used to threaten members. And, there's a reason my current boss, former Senator Jim DeMint, started Senate Conservatives Fund to combat this. So that when members get their funding stripped for opposing, the current thing, that there's a backstop, that there's somebody else out there that can come in with resources, to raise money to elect and sustain conservatives. But that's hard. It's hard to do. And I think the only way it changes that culture in the Senate is if you just don't have 1 or 2 members, you have 7 or 8 or 10. It's much harder when you're in a group, right? And that's what makes the House Freedom Caucus so powerful, by the way, is because they always act together in a group.
That I love that. I love the House Freedom Caucus. I think it's just amazing. Like the work that they have done, the ability to bring attention and light to issues like especially the border issues and other issues on that are right now. We're looking at COVID as being one of those issues. The investigations that'll be ongoing and the pressure that they can put on them is important. What's the latest with the leadership in the House right now? I mean, Congressman Andy Biggs has thrown his hat into the ring for leader. Kevin McCarthy, obviously, there's a lot of folks that are very, very upset with the way he's been handling issues and handling his role. Does Andy Biggs even have the votes right now?
Well, I think it'll be very interesting because one feature of the House of Representatives is that the speaker is voted. The election speaker is the whole House, right? The whole House has to vote for whoever is speaker. It's conducted on the House floor in an open setting. People can watch this on C-SPAN.
I know. I like that. It's actually a really cool love thing. That. Yeah, it's awesome.
And so Kevin McCarthy has been nominated by the Republicans to be their nominee for speaker, but he has not won it. And because the margin of the majority is so narrow that right now, I think as it stands, 5 House members have come out and said affirmatively we're not voting for him. And so he doesn't have the votes right now. If just as a simple matter of arithmetic, of math, he doesn't have those votes. Can he get them? I think that's the question.
What can he do to get them? Can he do a Mitch McConnell on everyone? Can he try to pull the purse strings or kind of wave some kind of document over their heads? I don't know.
The House Freedom Caucus has been very clear about it. They said, look, this is a document of rules changes that we want you to adopt, for us to be able to say, yes, we have faith in you as speaker. And some of those rules changes get to what we were just talking about, right? They don't want these bills dumped on them within 2 hours before the vote, right? They want 72 hours. They want an amendment process. They want representation on the Rules Committee, all these things.
Oh, so, common sense. So just common sense, just the stuff that Americans want. So it shouldn't be that hard for McCarthy to say yes to this, right? I mean, I would think he would just walk into the office. Hey, Andy, look, I get what you guys are doing. I know this is the best thing for the American people. Let's move forward with it. Why won't he do that?
Because these rules changes democratize the House in a way that has not been done in the last 10 or 15 years. His adoption of these rules changes would make him less powerful, right? It would make power. And that is,
it's like House of Cards again.
It is. Like it is.
But Mean Girls with House of Cards right now.
No, it's so much of the process is all about empowering a select group of individuals. And once that the House and Senate leadership have that power, they do not want to give it up. But I would argue representative government means everyone should be able to participate. Everybody should be able to participate on behalf of the voters that sent them to Washington. Your member of Congress being able to amend a bill, they are speaking for you. By shutting them down, the Republican leadership is shutting down the voters. And so I think we need to start thinking about it in those terms. And, I hope, right, I applaud the Freedom Caucus for what they're doing. I think it's a service to the House.
So are you like a shark when you walk into the Capitol, into the Capitol, they see you coming down the hall and they're like running. There's Rachel. They're like running and she's going to start forcing us to really take a look in the mirror and we're going to have to she wants us to give up our power. Are they just like literally running away from you? The parting of the sea?
I mean, I'm probably not their favorite person to see. I will say that, but I do teach a lot of House and Senate staff to try and, use their rights and use their authorities. So
I think it's awesome. I think it's so amazing what you do because I feel like I learned so much from you. The thing is, for a lot of Americans, everyone who's listening, I'm sure all of you out there listening, I'm just like you. There are so many things that I do understand because I've worked in Washington, but yet so much more that I don't. I feel lost in the minutia. I feel like, is there some secret club where all these congressional members show up late at night and they decide on these rules? And I don't have any idea what's going on and how they're negotiating it. And if it's a cocktail party or if it's on the House floor, I sometimes feel so lost. And then when we see the pork bills, and which is funny, and I have to bring that up. I could keep you forever on this show, Rachel. Again, there are some people that I just want to I just want to learn everything about like what you know, because I look at these pork bills and we have groups that expose them every year after, you know, an omnibus bill passes. And it's like, oh, by the way, haha, the joke's on you, the American people. You know, they just spent this much on, you know, watching ashtrays break at the Pentagon, or how many. And I know those got to be like some slush funds for something else. It can't be that they're just breaking ashtrays, or I remember that actually from when Clinton was in office. That was an actual study they put millions of dollars into. But I am like, I'm baffled. I'm baffled that it continues. I'm baffled that it doesn't stop. I'm wondering if you should lead, have you ever thought of this? Like seminars for the American people so that we can arm ourselves with this knowledge and support, like on local levels, our congressional members that will actually demand this.
Yeah. No, I try to speak to as many grassroots groups as possible on this issue because, you know, everybody thinks, oh, procedure, it doesn't, you know, it's boring, it doesn't really matter, or it's not important, or it's too complicated. And all those things are wrong, right? It is really important because it's how your member protects their rights to represent you. It's, you know, using
it's our money.
The rules, right, is how you get the votes, right, to strip these things from bills, or, you know, how you enforce against earmarks, or all these things it's all governed in the rules. And the second thing I would say is it's not actually complicated, right? Don't be scared of it. Procedure is actually very rational, very logical. You know, if you serve on any board of any kind, right, from Little League up to Fortune 500 companies, you're dealing with, you know, process rules. You know, everybody knows Robert's Rules, you know, the big book that sort of governs parliamentary procedure on boards. So it has a lot of real life application and you can understand it. And I would say so much of our self-government depends on the American people understanding what's going on in Washington. And it's in the interest of the swamp for you to think it's too complicated for you. It's not.
Right. It's kind of like the old Catholic Church hiding the Bible, right? It was kind of like, you guys can't, I don't want you guys reading it. And I'm Catholic, but it was like in the past, it was like very secretive.
They don't want you to know what's possible. So you should, you know, an armed citizen should know exactly what's possible and to know the rights that are available to their members. So you don't buy the excuses anymore.
And last question, I promise. But if you were sitting at a table right now with Andy Biggs and the Freedom Caucus, and, you know, what would you advise them? What would you say to them to keep up the fight, to give them the courage to stand up? And I'm not saying, I know Kevin McCarthy, I've had great conversations with him, but I do believe that we need to take our power back. And I think that if you're a good human being and you're doing things for the right reason, you are going to do what's best for the American people and not for yourself. So what would you say to them?
So I would say that, you know, they're in a moment that I haven't seen. You know, 16 years in Washington, I've never seen conservatives have this much power to shape what's about to happen in the House. And the only reason they have that is because the margin of the majority is so small. So this is a tremendous opportunity for them. And I think they have to decide if it gets to the point where they don't think Andy Biggs, you know, might not pull it out, he might not have the votes, then what concessions can you demand from McCarthy? Because they have the ability, you know, to operate in a House in almost a coalition style government, right? Where he has to negotiate with the Democrats and he has to negotiate with the House Freedom Caucus. That is the kind of actual change, you know, they have the power to make actual changes to the process in ways conservatives have not had for a very long time. So I think, you know, they've played it very well. And, you know, I urge them, you know, not to give up without a fight. And if it's not going to be Andy Biggs replacing McCarthy, then what are we getting from McCarthy? Because they have the power right now to do both.
Right. Okay, that's from you, Rachel Bovard, direct advice, Congressman Andy Biggs and everybody on the House Freedom Caucus. To you, I mean, this is like free of charge on the Sarah Carter Show. You have the power now to fight for us and to fight back and not relinquish that power. You can really make this happen. You will be heroes. I mean, she'll give you an award. I don't know. Do you have any awards you can have? I don't know.
I'll
you call him up to come up with some kind of amazing award.
I love Andy Biggs anyway. He's a good friend.
Too. I do. I think Congressman Biggs is awesome. I'm going to actually bring him on the show now. We're going to talk about this.
Yes.
We are going to get him fired up. up, right? We're going to get him fired up. He's a brilliant guy. Thank you so much, Rachel, for being a part of the show. You're wonderful. I hope you come back. I've learned so much from you, and I know every one of you listening right now has learned a lot too, because I think we are scared. A lot of people are scared of talking about procedure. Even reporters are sometimes. We're just kind of like, oh, we don't want to go down that rabbit hole. We're not a congressional reporter. But it really is kind of simple, right? It is. It's laid out there for us, and we should ask questions. We shouldn't be afraid. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, before we wrap this up, I told you I was going to give you the latest on the Biden open border policy that he has. Shocker. Listen to this. Biden's fast track asylum program, 67% of illegal aliens never show up for court hearings after they are released into the U.S. Big shocker there. We've been talking about that forever. Big shocker. This is the Breitbart opinion piece. I think it's a great piece because it lays out the fact that the Biden administration really wants an open border policy, could care less about how you feel, could care less about your children, or the fact that, fentanyl is pouring across our border, or the fact that our communities are being overwhelmed with people living in the shadows, or the fact that 2.7 million people just in the last fiscal year have made their way into the U.S. and more than 1 million since Biden have been known gotaways. They really do not care about you. Let me read a little bit from this story because it's just going to blow your mind. The data compiled by Transactional Records Access Clearinghouse, TRAC, at Syracuse University reveals the extent to which Biden's expansive catch and release network is freeing illegal aliens into the U.S. interior under the guise of seeking asylum, who have no intention of actually seeking asylum because they don't even have any valid claims. And they really don't. Listen to these stats. In May 2021, Biden started the dedicated dockets program. It was a fast track program for the asylum process. It promised to get border crossers through the federal immigration courts within 300 days because there's such a huge backlog. But by the way, folks, there's been a backlog since the Bush administration, and I've been covering that. But listen to these numbers. More than 110,000 border crossers have been in the program, but get this, only about 40,000 of those cases have actually been closed. Look, I've talked to so many people. I've been all over the border, all over Central America, all over Mexico. And the majority of the people that I have spoken with, the majority of people who have talked to me have all said that it's economics, that they're coming here because they want a better job or whatever, or they have family here. They make everything but an asylum claim. But a lot of times what happens is they are prepared and trained by the smugglers before they come in. So they kind of give them the tips, right? And not only the smugglers, but did you guys know there's a huge business of lawyers and nonprofits at the border that are waiting for people to come through, and they represent them. And so they just tell them what they need to say. They just tell them. For those that are even making some asylum claims, they are just telling them, oh, this is what you need to say. Oh, are you gay? Okay, tell them that you were persecuted in your country. Could it be religious? Go ahead and tell them that it was for religious reasons. It's so funny. Not funny, actually quite sad. But I was talking to an ICE officer once, and he said to me that he gets a lot of people from India. And when they interview them, they're saying well, what are you claiming, for asylum? And they said, well, it's religious persecution. And they said, well, what are you? And the person would say, well, I'm a Christian and I'm being persecuted for being a Christian in India. And they said, well, what is your favorite Christian holiday? And they said 4th of July. But guess what? That doesn't even matter. Because as soon as they caught them in the lie, their supervisors said, just fast track them in. The big guy, Mr. 10%, and his administration don't want us repatriating people back to their nation. So just who cares? Let's just not get complicated here. Let's just let them in. So there you go. Tax dollars at work. I can't say it enough. You and I are the future of our country, right? You and I. We have to stand up for freedom. We have to stand up for the principles that make our nation beautiful, great, and the envy of the rest of the world. And there's nothing wrong with that. We should never feel ashamed. We should never feel ashamed. What we should feel ashamed about is if we don't do our job, if we don't protect our children, if we don't protect our nation, and if we let the leftist radicals and these amoral people, take over our country. We will have nobody to blame but ourselves. Get involved in your local community. Get involved in local politics. Don't be the silent majority. Don't be afraid to speak out. Follow me on Twitter at Sara Carter DC and on Instagram at Sara Carter at SCarterDC at SCarterDC on Instagram. God bless you. God bless our great nation. And God bless the great state of Texas.